On the 28th floor of Larian Tech's New York headquarters, the Monday morning sky was surprisingly clear, yet inside the glass-walled meeting room, an undercurrent of tension was unmistakable. Rose Martin, a 55-year-old veteran who had dedicated 15 years of her life to Larian Tech, walked in with her usual composure, though her gaze briefly flickered when she noticed Karen Johnsonhead of Ardand, Emily Watson HR representative, already seated, their neatly stacked files laid out on the table. Karen cleared her throat, her voice resonating with a blend of formality and cold determination. "Rose, I'm afraid we need to discuss terminating your position. Larian Tech is restructuring for a younger image, and I'm sure you understand what that implies." The words landed with the sharpness of a blade, slicing through the tense stillness, making the space feel even more oppressive. Emily nodded in agreement, gently sliding a folder containing the official notice toward Rose. "We sincerely regret this," she said, her lips stretching into a polite smile, "but this is entirely the board's decision." At that moment, everyone assumed Rose would be stunned, would demand explanations, or at the very least show some sign of hurt. But all she did was press her lips together, giving a calm, almost eerie smile, as though she had anticipated every bit of this conversation. The truth is, over the past 2 weeks, a string of misdirected emails have revealed Larian Tech's grand plan to wipe out its outdated workforce, and Rose knew precisely where she stood in that calculation. She was labeled old guard, an obstacle to a bold new agenda obsessed with flashy innovation. She didn't argue, she didn't resist. After all, Rose had silently prepared for this very moment. The severance letter wasn't simply the start of a betrayal-soaked tale, but the prelude to a dramatic comeback where her true abilities would be the winning cards in a game of high-stakes corporate maneuvers. Sensing Rose's unusual silence, Karen shot a glance at Emily, lifting an eyebrow as if to say, shouldn't she be breaking down or getting furious? Yet Rose simply nodded politely, as though accepting the situation, never mind that a steely determination flashed in her eyes. It was this small moment that signaled, beneath her unassuming exterior, Rose Martin held crucial cards, ready to flip the board in a way nobody at Larian Tech could foresee. And that was only the first move in what promised to be a riveting story about self-worth, pride, and an intricate strategy that would propel her from disposable employee to the central figure of a power struggle the company hadn't bargained for. In the days following that tense morning, Rose Martin began reflecting on the subtle changes that had taken place at Larian Tech well before anyone had the courage to utter the words termination to her face. She recalled how, 6 months earlier, she had spearheaded the recruitment of 6 extraordinarily talented engineers from prestigious universities, each one handpicked for their unique expertise in data processing and systems architecture. Under Rose's guidance, this eclectic team had worked tirelessly on an ambitious project nicknamed Quantum Stream, an advanced algorithm designed to handle massive volumes of real-time data at breakneck speed, something that could easily become a game-changer in the competitive world of enterprise software. What Rose found most remarkable was how the upper management had once hailed her as the visionary behind Quantum Stream, thanking her for the late nights spent debugging code and the endless presentations she delivered to woo new investors. Yet, only a few months later, those very same people seemed reluctant to even acknowledge her role in the technology's success. During an impromptu meeting in early spring, Karen Johnson and a few other executives had vaguely mentioned a need to finalize patent paperwork, then curtly assured Rose that the legal team would handle all filings. Initially, Rose trusted that everything was in order. However, by pure chance, she received a misdirected email from someone in the legal department, an email that contained references to incomplete patent applications, ambiguous claim language, and an unsettling discussion about crediting the company rather than any individual inventor. At first, she skimmed through the message with a sense of confusion, but the more she read, the clearer it became. Larian Tech had not actually filed the patent for Quantum Stream, despite repeatedly claiming it was on its way to formal approval. Alarmed by what she uncovered, Rose discreetly dug deeper into the company's internal documentation, combing through digital archives and email trails. She discovered secret strategy memos hinting that management believed she, as the architect of Quantum Stream, might become expendable once her knowledge had been fully documented and her contributions adequately transferred to the younger, more malleable engineers. The memos even discussed the possibility of letting her go before her name could be formally listed on the patent, ensuring that Larian Tech would not have to negotiate on intellectual property rights with an aging former employee. The brazen tactic felt both disrespectful and utterly ruthless, given how crucial Rose had been to the project. In their eyes, it seemed that a woman in her mid-50s was less about innovation and more about an obstacle to a modern corporate image. Realizing the depth of this betrayal, Rose experienced a swirl of emotions, ranging from anger to a peculiar sense of clarity that sharpened her resolve. These people, who once praised her technical brilliance, were now plotting to erase her name from the very invention she had brought to life. She remembered how the entire system of Quantum Stream Meavery line of code, every conceptual diagram, had initially been her brainchild, born from years of researching parallel processing and distributed computing. She also recalled the countless meetings where Karen, Emily, and other executives raved about how revolutionary the concept was. And now, with the hidden plan to eliminate her before the patent could be sealed, Rose understood that this was no accidental oversight. It was a methodical scheme to cut costs and control the future of Quantum Stream without her. Although the realization stung like a fresh wound, Rose was not the type to crumble under corporate politics. Quietly, she decided it was time to protect herself and the work she had poured her life into. If Larian Tech thought they could discard her at the last moment and steal credit for what she had built, then they clearly had no idea who they were dealing with. The 6 engineers she mentored were not just colleagues. They respected her deeply and had grown under her mentorship, becoming a cohesive, formidable unit. They too deserved better than to be pawns in some internal power play. Perhaps Karen Johnson in the upper ranks of Larian Tech believed Rose lacked the foresight or resources to push back. But in that misdirected email lay the seeds of a revenge arc far more elaborate than they could have imagined. Night after night, Rose gathered every bit of evidence that proved she was not only the inventor of Quantum Stream, but also the person who had laid out a substantial part of its future enhancements. Armed with detailed development logs, secure backup files, and timestamped design notes, she quietly positioned herself to challenge the very structure that thought it could simply erase her name and move on. From the pristine view of her modest apartment on the Lower East Side, she often stared out at the shimmering skyline of New York City, reflecting on how quickly reverence could turn into betrayal. Yet, each time she recalled the dismissive tone of those private memos or the smug looks she had caught glimpses of in certain executive eyes, she felt a steady fire ignite within her own that told her this was far from over. The company might think it had a complete strategy, but if there was one thing Rose Martin knew better than anyone else, it was how to anticipate the next move and strike back when the time was ripe. And as every passing day revealed more of Larian Tech's hidden maneuvers, Rose, too, solidified her resolve to unleash a counteroffensive so precise and powerful that even the glimmering heights of corporate prestige wouldn't shield them from the fallout. That evening, Rose Martin slipped into a discreet corner of Azure Prime, a softly lit fine dining restaurant situated on the quieter outskirts of New York City, far removed from the imposing tower of Larian Tech. She had chosen this venue for its reputation of offering both exceptional cuisine and unparalleled privacy, a setting where conversations of consequence could unfold behind ornate wooden screens and away from curious gazes. Rose knew her dinner companion would appreciate the thoughtful choice. James Whitfield, the charismatic CEO of Horizon Analytics, Larian Tech's most formidable competitor, was a man who valued both taste and secrecy in equal measure. Almost the moment Rose stepped in, a hostess guided her to a secluded alcove in the back of the restaurant, where James sat waiting with an air of relaxed confidence, his suit impeccably tailored, his dark hair brushed back in a manner that signaled both elegance and resolve. He rose to greet her with a firm handshake and a knowing smile that spoke volumes. "So," he said in a low tone as they settled in, "they actually went through with it?" His question hung in the air, echoing the swirl of unspoken tension that had defined Rose's last few days at Larian Tech, and she gave a measured nod while picking up the menu. James had apparently already guessed her answer. "I knew they'd make their move sooner or later," he continued, his voice reflecting both sympathy and a slight trace of satisfaction. He, perhaps more than anyone, understood the gravity of Larian Tech's mistake in severing ties with the inventor of Quantum Stream. After all, Horizon Analytics had long admired Rose's groundbreaking work and the tremendous edge it could give any company wise enough to harness it. When the server arrived to take their order, saw delicate seared salmon for Rose, a medium rare fillet for James, accompanied by an exquisite bottle of Cabernet, James waited until they were alone again to lean closer, his eyes sharp with intent. Your departure from Larian Tech, as unfortunate as it is, opens doors I've been hoping to unlock for quite some time, he said, tapping an elegant leather folder on the table. Shall we talk business? Rose had anticipated this conversation ever since she noticed the suspicious gaps in Larian Tech's patent filings and realized the corporation was plotting to claim Quantum Stream as its sole property without duly crediting her. She had spent endless hours compiling proof time-stamped logs, concept sketches, and independent development notes that clearly demonstrated which improvements were developed on her own, outside company hours, and on her personal equipment. If anything, the so-called oversight by Larian Tech's legal division had only accelerated her decision to stake her claim and partner with a rival that recognized her true value. Horizon Analytics, under James's leadership, was that rival armed with resources, ambition, and most importantly, a willingness to credit the rightful inventor. As Rose opened the leather folder James provided, her eyes flicked over the crisp pages of a draft licensing agreement that promised her not only a substantial signing bonus, but also a role as Chief Innovation Strategist at Horizon Analytics. The finer print, however, captivated her attention the most, a clause detailing the exclusive rights to her enhanced algorithm, along with a roadmap for integrating Quantum Stream technology into Horizon's next generation of enterprise products. She had seen many contracts in her years at Larian Tech, but none had the same sense of mutual respect and frank recognition of her individual contributions. Still, Rose decided to hold back her immediate reaction, wanting to gauge James's sincerity before committing to what could be the biggest move of her career. Over the course of their meal, the conversation ebbed and flowed from polite small talk about new tech trends to pointed discussions of how precisely Horizon Analytics intended to outmaneuver Larian Tech in the data solutions market. While James recounted the strategic advantage of weaving Rose's algorithm into his company's existing product lines, Rose found herself quietly savoring the sense of validation she was finally experiencing. For too long, she had been relegated to the background at Larian Tech, an older woman in a sector that prized the appearance of youth and novelty, even if it meant undervaluing genuine experience. Now, each nod of James's head and each thoughtful question he asked only reinforced her belief that Horizon Analytics could be the perfect stage for her next act. When they reached the subject of public announcements, James tapped his fingers lightly against the table and confessed that discretion was paramount. He suggested releasing a statement only after Rose had formally completed her exit paperwork at Larian Tech, ensuring that her spotless record and all the vital evidence proving her sole authorship remained intact. Rose agreed, feeling the weight of the moment as the significance of her choice settled in. She pictured the shock that would unfold in the upper echelons of Larian Tech once the news broke that Horizon Analytics had secured not just any new hire, but the architect of Quantum Stream herself. She could almost envision Karen Johnson's and Emily Watson's dumbfounded faces, realizing too late that their meticulous plans to claim the technology exclusively had crumbled in the blink of an eye. Their meal wound down with a decadent dessert, a shared slice of rich chocolate cake that Rose enjoyed more for the symbolism than the sweetness. This was the taste of freedom, of validated intellect, of a final farewell to the toxic environment she had endured for years. As she prepared to sign on the dotted line, James's voice adopted a gentler tone, a fleeting moment of empathy slipping through the otherwise calculating facade. "Are you sure you're comfortable with this?" he asked, as if acknowledging the emotional upheaval that leaving a long-time employer might cause. Rose placed her pen down for just a moment, meeting James's gaze steadily. She recalled every slammed door, every backhanded compliment, and every instance Larian Tech had treated her like a relic of a bygone era. Then she exhaled softly, closed her eyes in brief reflection, and nodded. Signing the agreement felt like sealing her future on her own terms, a far cry from the fate others had tried to impose on her. She glanced at James, whose eyes glimmered with both relief and excitement. "Then let's make them regret the day they thought they could dismiss you so easily," he said, lifting his glass in a quiet toast that resonated with mutual resolve. Rose clinked her glass against his, fully aware that, beyond the warm glow of this upscale restaurant, a storm was brewing that would shake Larian Tech to its core, all because it had underestimated the single factor it couldn't control: her unwavering determination to protect what was rightfully hers. Thursday and Friday at Larian Tech blurred into a whirlwind of exit interviews, hastily scheduled knowledge transfer sessions, and awkward goodbyes, creating a surreal atmosphere that left Rose Martin both exhausted and oddly composed. Each time she stepped into a conference room, she encountered a new group of colleagues or HR representatives wanting her to sign yet another document, confirm a project handoff, or provide some parting insight. Some of them could hardly meet her gaze, offering half-hearted condolences like, "I'm really sorry this is happening," while others simply avoided conversation altogether, unsure of how to navigate the sudden departure of someone so central to the company's flagship technology. Despite the hectic schedule, Rose remained methodical, taking careful notes and ensuring that every password, process document, and code snippet for QuantumStream was meticulously labeled and packaged for whichever junior engineer might inherit her workload. She understood that leaving a clean record would protect her from any accusation that she had withheld company property, a point that felt more important than ever given the manipulative tactics she had already witnessed. When an HR coordinator casually slid a non-disclosure agreement across the table, emphasizing that any proprietary technology developed at Larian Tech remains our intellectual property, Rose merely offered a polite but knowing smile. She stated calmly that she had no intention of retaining anything that belonged to the company, carefully emphasizing the difference between work created during her assigned duties and the refined iterations she had developed independently on her own time and equipment. On Friday afternoon, Rose found herself in one final meeting with Emily Watson, the HR representative who had sat in on her termination discussion earlier that week. Emily recited an official checklist, half reading from her laptop, half trying to appear empathetic. She confirmed Rose's last paycheck, reiterated the terms of her severance package, and reminded her to return all company-issued devices by day's end. The moment came when Emily forced a tight-lipped smile and asked if Rose had any feedback on her experience. Rose, who had once admired Larian Tech for fostering a place of true innovation, replied with measured civility, stating that the company might want to review how it values the very people whose ideas elevate its status in the market. Emily, looking uncomfortable, simply nodded. As Rose gathered personal belongings from her office family photographs, tokens of appreciation from her dedicated team, and the symbolic award she had earned for championing QuantumStream, Karen Johnson made one last appearance, lingering by the doorway with feigned casualness. "You understand it's not personal," Karen began, echoing her usual corporate rationale about reshaping the company's future with younger talent, then paused when she noticed Rose's calm demeanor. In a moment that felt almost like a reversal of roles, Rose became the one in control, smiling gently as she revealed she had already accepted a new position and would be starting on Monday. Karen's surprised expression spoke volumes, betraying the assumption that Rose, at 55, would struggle to find another role anywhere near as significant. Eventually, Rose placed her final box into the trunk of her car and paused to look back at the mirrored facade of Larian Tech's main tower. From where she stood, she could see the top floor lights still glowing, likely signaling another late-night meeting where executives deliberated how to manage without her. She felt neither sadness nor anger, just a profound sense of resolve, because she knew that what awaited her at Horizon Analytics was far more than a mere career move. It was the beginning of a well-earned validation. With that, Rose slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, and left behind 15 years of dedication and invention, determined to channel her experience, her vision, and her hidden advantages into a future that no one at Larian Tech could have possibly predicted. Monday dawned with a brilliant sunrise that bathed the skyscrapers of Manhattan in warm hues, though the real heat would emanate from news alerts and frantic boardroom calls rather than the morning light. At exactly 7 a.m., Horizon Analytics released a concise yet explosive press statement announcing the exclusive acquisition of Rose Martin's groundbreaking data processing algorithm, formerly the pride of Larian Tech Hand, welcoming her as their new chief innovation strategist. The headline alone was potent enough to ripple through the tech world like a seismic event, but it was the accompanying details that sparked genuine chaos among Larian Tech's executives. Not only had Rose retained all rights to the refinements she had meticulously developed outside company hours, she had also secured a licensing arrangement that would place Horizon Analytics on a fast track to dominate the market for enterprise data solutions. That very morning, Rose arrived at Horizon's headquarters, a sleek, modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows, and was greeted by a quiet sense of anticipation humming through the corridors. James Whitfield, the CEO who had orchestrated her hiring with unwavering discretion, met her at the lobby with an easy smile, giving her a quick tour before guiding her to her new office on the 20th floor. As she settled into a sunlit corner space overlooking the city, James leaned in to inform her that the press release had already lit up industry newsletters, prompting journalists, investors, and curious onlookers to flood Horizon's communication channels with requests for comment. Rose merely nodded, her calm mask betraying only the faintest trace of satisfaction. She could already picture the storm gathering at Larian Tech, where her former colleagues would be stumbling over themselves to understand how they had lost a woman behind Quantum Stream. Meanwhile, less than 10 miles away, the top floor of Larian Tech's glass tower devolved into a frenzy the moment the morning headlines hit everyone's inbox. Karen Johnson, who had so confidently signed Rose's termination just a few days earlier, scrambled to assemble the legal team, demanding they search every archive contract, every project file, and every email that might prove Larian Tech had some remaining claim to the algorithm. Certain board members rushed to dial into an emergency call, their voices clamoring in near panic over the speaker, as the reality sank in that their flagship product, a data processing powerhouse, generating significant revenue, could be compromised if they did not secure a proper license from Horizon. The stock market's response was mercilessly swift, with Larian Tech shares plunging a solid 7% within the first hour of trading, and the company's leadership struggled to issue placating statements that rang hollow in the face of mounting investor anxiety. From her new desk, Rose quietly monitored the developments through a stream of messages from former coworkers, among them a young software engineer named Diego who had once been part of her hand-picked team. He texted in disbelief, describing the absolute chaos erupting on every floor. Karen is fuming, Emily is losing it, and they're forming a task force just to figure out how this happened. Everyone is talking about you. Rose, recognizing the mixture of curiosity and admiration in Diego's words, replied with a reassuring note that he and the rest of the team should check their personal emails for new, more promising opportunities. After all, James had already prepared enticing offers for those loyal to Rose's vision, ensuring no one who stood by her would be left adrift. By mid-morning, legal analysts across the tech sector were dissecting Horizon's news, speculating on how Rose managed to maintain ownership of the algorithm's improvements. Talk radio hosts and online commentators delighted in repeating the story of an overlooked creator who walked away from a corporate giant to join a rival, effectively crippling her old employer's competitive edge in one decisive stroke. The narrative was irresistible. A seasoned engineer dismissed for appearing too old in a youth-obsessed industry, only to reveal that she held the true keys to the technology her former company depended on. As public sympathy mounted for Rose, Larian Tech's leadership found it increasingly difficult to control the rapidly escalating PR nightmare. They sent her a carefully worded email wound that attempted to sound conciliatory while still implying that she owed them a phone call to clear up a misunderstanding. Rose forwarded it to Horizon's legal department without a reply, a silent but powerful message that she no longer felt obligated to answer to a company that had dismissed her so callously. At noon, James appeared in Rose's office with a victorious grin, holding printed summaries of market reactions. Horizon stock is up by nearly 12% since opening, he said, placing the papers on her desk. Investors love what we're doing. Tech outlets are calling us the bold new leader in data analytics. Rose glanced at the numbers, feeling a subtle mixture of vindication and calm determination. For her, this wasn't merely about personal revenge, though. It certainly offered a sweet sense of justice, but about finally being recognized for her expertise and ensuring that no corporate machine could trample her contributions again. By early afternoon, Horizon's PR team had scheduled a series of interviews for Rose with influential tech publications and podcasts eager to discuss the significance of her algorithm. She felt a wave of excitement she had not experienced in years, the realization that she had found an environment where her voice would be amplified, not stifled. Simultaneously, the ripple effects at Larian Tech intensified. One large client publicly expressed concerns about the uncertain legal future of Larian Tech's offerings, indicating they might shift their business to Horizon. Each new crack in Larian Tech's once impenetrable facade resonated like a small victory for Rose, especially knowing how the company's leadership had tried to phase her out quietly, hoping her absence would go unnoticed. As the close of business approached, Rose found a moment to reflect on the startling speed with which her situation had transformed. Only 3 days prior, she had been cleaning out her desk and enduring forced pleasantries from people who assumed she had nowhere else to go. Today, she watched as Larian Tech scrambled in disbelief, confronted with the full measure of its own short-sighted decisions, while she stood at the helm of a game-changing partnership that promised not only professional triumph, but personal empowerment as well. Perhaps the day's most satisfying detail was that Rose, now safely ensconced at Horizon and armed with the legal protection she had painstakingly arranged, owed nothing to her old company, but the courtesy of demonstrating how ruthlessly the business world repays betrayal and underestimation. As that tumultuous Monday bled into the following days, Larian Tech found itself caught in a spiraling storm of discontent and desperation that only intensified under the glaring spotlight of public scrutiny. Board members, alarmed by the rapid plunge in stock value and the influx of anxious messages from major investors, wasted no time demanding an emergency session, which was hastily scheduled for the very next morning. Rumors spread that the primary target of the board's ire would be none other than Karen Johnson herself, whose oversight in failing to secure the patent for Rose Martin's algorithm had proven catastrophic. Although Karen had been so sure of her corporate maneuvering, confidently firing Rose and anticipating no repercussions, she now walked into the boardroom with clammy palms and a forced veneer of composure, certain that her position might be in serious jeopardy. Inside the glass-walled conference suite overlooking Manhattan skyline, the tension felt palpable. Karen could see the stern faces of the board members who had already begun murmuring about gross negligence and leadership lapses. Next to her stood Emily Watson from HR, who looked equally unsettled. The board wasted no time laying out the facts. Larian Tech stock had plunged by an alarming percentage since Rose's new role at Horizon Analytics became public. An exodus of unsettled clients was brewing as rival companies expressed growing interest in collaborating with Horizon, and the legal department was in disarray trying to figure out whether any angle existed to contest Rose's patent claims. At the center of it all sat the humiliating truth that the company had gambled on discarding an experienced innovator without safeguarding its principal technology, a misstep so glaring it was nearly impossible to defend. Before Karen could utter more than a few words in her defense, one of the senior board members, an imposing woman named Beatrice Owens, cut her off with a firm gesture. Beatrice demanded to know what had happened with the patent filings and questioned why the legal team hadn't included Rose's name explicitly as the inventor, especially when Quantum Stream's architecture was widely known to be her brainchild. Karen stumbled through an explanation involving team-based development and oversights in documentation, but these feeble excuses only seemed to fuel the board's frustration. By the end of the meeting, the sense was clear. Karen's days as head of RID might be numbered, especially given the growing media narrative that Larian Tech had committed an unforgivable blunder by parting ways with its most valuable mind. While Karen endured this public chastisement, Emily Watson was already contemplating her own exit strategy. She had been complicit in ushering Rose out, and now found herself stuck in a position with no easy defense. Several key employees, many of whom Rose had mentored personally, were quietly updating their resumes and even scheduling interviews with Horizon Analytics, enticed by the possibility of rejoining Rose under far better conditions. Those who remained at Larian Tech grew increasingly uneasy, sensing that the leadership team that had once seemed so invincible was crumbling from the top down. Even middle managers felt the ripple effect, as they struggled to reassure clients and partners that the company could still deliver on its promises. In truth, however, each defection and each skeptical investor call only accelerated the collapse of confidence that threatened to unravel the company from within. It did not take long for the rest of the industry to hear the news that Larian Tech was in crisis mode, and that the once revered executives were teetering on the brink of losing their influence, if not their positions outright. Whispers circulated about who might replace Karen, and whether a new wave of leadership could salvage the battered brand before it slid deeper into disrepute. In the midst of these speculations, the most painful blow landed when a high-profile clientele that accounted for a substantial share of Larian Tech's revenues publicly hinted at transferring its entire contract to Horizon Analytics, citing concerns over the unstable future of Larian's core software. That revelation sent another shockwave through the corporate ranks, prompting frantic damage control efforts that yielded little result. By the end of the week, the board delivered its verdict. Karen Johnson would resign immediately, effectively taking the fall for what was deemed a failure to protect essential intellectual property. A separate announcement stated that Emily Watson had also stepped down, though in truth, she was quietly persuaded to exit before she too became a scapegoat. In their place, the board appointed an interim leadership team focused on restoring shareholder confidence, a hollow promise that rang with desperation. Employees internally whispered that the new leaders, while competent, couldn't magically undo the damage from such a high-profile blunder, especially now that Rose Martin was firmly anchored at Horizon Analytics, drawing media buzz, client interest, and top-tier talents who had little incentive to remain at Larian Tech. Watching from her new office, Rose heard every update through the grapevine. Some came from old friends who still worked at Larian, others trickled in via Diego, who relished sharing the drama in real time. She could not deny the quiet sense of vindication she felt, knowing that the same people who had so brazenly dismissed her were now facing the fallout of their own short-sighted decisions. Still, it wasn't Schadenfreude alone that drove Rose. She felt a renewed commitment to creating a cutting-edge data solution at Horizon, one that would cement her reputation as a leading visionary and remind the entire tech world that the best innovations do not spring from ambition alone, but from respect for the very minds that shape the future. In the weeks following the leadership shakeup at Larian Tech, Rose Martin found herself busier than ever as she took the reins at Horizon Analytics, determined to build a development powerhouse that would eclipse anything she had previously overseen. Although she had been given a prestigious title Chief Innovation Strategist, she spent less time in a corner office and more time down in the engineering labs with the 6 talented developers who had followed her from Larian Tech, each of them relieved to escape the turmoil that plagued their former employer. Under Rose's direction, the newly assembled team quickly gelled in an environment that prized collaboration over corporate politics, and their focus shifted toward perfecting an upgraded version of QuantumStream, one that integrated the refined algorithm Rose had long kept in reserve. As soon as news of their progress began to circulate, Horizon Analytics received a flurry of inquiries from prospective clients eager to adopt the next generation of data processing technology. One by one, enterprise giants that had once relied on Larian Tech solutions now looked toward Rose's new project with keen interest, and some openly announced they were halting any further expansion of Larian contracts until they could evaluate Horizon's offering. In a matter of days, the balance of power in the enterprise analytics market tipped visibly, prompting tech publications to run headlines proclaiming that Rose Martin, once dismissed as too old-fashioned, was now driving one of the most dynamic innovations in the field. While Larian's board scrambled to appoint temporary executives capable of halting the company's spiral, Horizon's stock price soared in response to every hint of Rose's involvement in upcoming releases. Amid the growing enthusiasm, James Whitfield, the CEO who had orchestrated Rose's recruitment, observed her team's progress with a mix of pride and relief. Over coffees in the early morning hours or impromptu brainstorming sessions in the late evening, he would occasionally express amazement at how quickly Rose had revitalized Horizon's development culture. She assured him that her success was not driven by personal revenge, despite how satisfying it felt to watch Larian Tech suffer the consequences of undervaluing her. Instead, she insisted that her real motivation lay in creating technology that could transform how businesses processed and interpreted massive sets of data. Each conversation with James highlighted the stark contrast between LarianTech's short-term mindset and the long-range vision that fueled Horizon's sudden ascent. Not long after Rose's team hit their first major milestone, achieving a 50% efficiency boost beyond what the original Quantum Stream had promised, several industry power brokers requested private demonstrations. These demonstrations turned into mini events of their own, with Rose calmly showcasing the system's real-time processing capabilities while a hush fell over the visiting executives, many of whom recognized that they were witnessing a solution that could permanently change the competitive landscape. Word spread quickly, enticing more potential customers to schedule meetings and fueling even broader media coverage of how one woman's departure from LarianTech had spurred a dramatic shift in industry fortunes. Rose's newly assembled group seemed to thrive under the scrutiny, their confidence bolstered by her steady leadership and the tangible results of their collective work. Yet the most striking sign of her triumph arrived in the form of an olive branch from LarianTech. The interim management team, aware that rebuilding Quantum Stream from scratch would be a massive undertaking, reached out with the hope of negotiating some licensing arrangement for Rose's newly patented improvements. They sent a respectful email that stood in stark contrast to the dismissive tone Rose had become so familiar with, offering to publicly recognize her contributions if she would be willing to entertain an agreement. When Rose reviewed the proposal with Horizon's legal staff, she felt a surge of validation, recalling how Karen Johnson and others had once waved off her concerns about the patent filings. Now, by their own hand, they were effectively conceding that they needed her genius or risk losing their core market share. In response, Horizon's attorneys crafted a reply that was polite but laden with stiff terms, including a significant licensing fee and a formal acknowledgement of Rose as the original inventor of the Quantum Stream framework. Observers across the tech sector watched with fascinated anticipation, fully aware that such a public acknowledgement would not only be a bitter pill for LarianTech to swallow, but also a pivotal moment that could define Rose's legacy. Sitting at her desk overlooking the city, Rose allowed herself a quiet, introspective moment, recalling the doubt she had initially felt when Larian forced her out, and the nights she had lain awake, unsure if she could muster the strength to begin again elsewhere. Looking at her bustling office where the bright minds of her team were collaborating on yet another round of enhancements, Rose realized that she had at last found a place where her experience was valued, her vision respected, and her past struggles redeemed. She granted the legal team permission to proceed with negotiations, fully aware that every step of this deal would highlight what LarianTech had thrown away. For the first time in her career, Rose recognized she was operating from a position of unquestionable power, able to dictate terms rather than merely accept them, and that her success built on a foundation of experience, resilience, and a touch of well-earned retribution had permanently shifted the balance of a tech industry once too quick to dismiss her. 3 months after the unsettling events that shook LarianTech, Rose Martin found herself standing on the main stage of the Global Innovation Summit, held at a sprawling convention center on the outskirts of Chicago. The spotlights illuminated her with an almost cinematic brilliance, and as she gazed into the audience's sea of bright-eyed engineers, tech executives, and aspiring developers, she felt the sort of calm confidence that comes only from overcoming a monumental challenge. Indeed, just a few months prior, she had walked out of LarianTech's gleaming tower with little more than a cardboard box of personal items and a head full of unspoken ideas. Yet here she was, about to deliver the keynote speech on the future of enterprise data processing. The crowd fell silent as the conference organizer introduced her, highlighting her new role at Horizon Analytics and her pivotal work on an algorithm that had revolutionized how large corporations manage massive datasets. Many in attendance already knew the dramatic backstory: an accomplished developer, dismissed by a short-sighted employer, who reclaimed her contributions and emerged stronger than ever. The murmurs of anticipation quieted when Rose finally took the microphone, her poised demeanor reflecting not only gratitude for the recognition, but also the unwavering determination she had honed through adversity. She began by outlining the technical brilliance behind QuantumString, explaining in clear, compelling terms how the algorithm had been reimagined to accelerate data processing by well over 50%, shattering performance expectations set by legacy systems. However, the most powerful part of her address went beyond code or market share. She spoke about valuing the very individuals who conceive and nurture breakthrough ideas, emphasizing that genuine innovation arises when companies build a culture of respect and allow creativity to flourish. She stressed how easily organizations can overlook the people who drive success, warning that if they push them aside in the name of reshaping the future, they risk losing the very spark that propels that future forward. A wave of applause rose through the conference hall by the time she concluded her speech, affirming that her message had struck a chord. Industry bloggers raced to post updates on social media, capturing sound bites of Rose talking passionately about the nexus of technical excellence and personal integrity. Meanwhile, backstage, James Whitfield and a few senior leaders from Horizon Analytics waited to congratulate her. Aware that Rose was no longer just a company figurehead, she was becoming a symbol for anyone who had ever been underestimated or told they were too old, too different, or too expensive to be relevant in a rapidly evolving market. This transformation from sideline developer to celebrated innovator spoke volumes about how one individual's conviction can alter not only a corporate trajectory, but also an entire industry's perspective on talent. That evening, Rose attended a private reception alongside other keynote speakers, many of whom approached her to recount their own experiences with corporate politics, hinting at the painful familiarity of being undervalued in environments where youth was prized above wisdom. She listened with empathy, sharing advice when prompted, and encouraging them to persist, to document their efforts meticulously, and to remember that true skill has a way of shining through even in the darkest of corporate climates. More than one whispered that Rose's story had given them the courage to fight for their ideas, refusing to let others decide the worth of their contributions. Not far away, a growing cluster of curious spectators had gathered around the event's monitor, reading a trending industry headline. Larian Tech considers high-stakes licensing deal, citing Rose Martin's patent as crucial. The headline itself felt like a full-circle moment. Larian Tech was now formally and publicly acknowledging the value it had once tried to claim as its own. Rose allowed herself a faint smile, knowing she had already authorized Horizon's legal team to finalize the strict terms that would confirm her position as the rightful inventor, reinforcing that respect is not granted by accident but earned through resilience and skill. When the reception finally wound down, Rose slipped into the brisk Chicago night with a renewed sense of purpose, her footsteps echoing against the concrete as she made her way to a waiting car. She couldn't help but reflect on the rapid transformation she had undergone, from an employee casually cast aside to a respected pioneer holding the reins of a new industry standard. And while the taste of vindication still lingered, she recognized that her story was more than an act of retribution. It was a living testament to what can happen when a person recognizes their own value and refuses to let fear or ignorance snuff out their potential. Thank you for joining Rose Martin's journey of resilience and triumph. If her story moved or inspired you, be sure to subscribe to our channel, share this video with friends who might need a boost of motivation, and leave a comment below about your own battles with underestimation or the lessons you've learned along the way. We'd love to hear from you.